we go. Okay, welcome back to Misconceptions. I am excited to have Rabbi Michael Bleischer join us today. This is a unique opportunity to, I think, probably, well, actually, no, we have had more than one male presenter, but I'm excited to have this conversation because we are going to get kind of into the weeds of working with couples and the impact of infertility and the couples and their relationship and lots of other stuff that goes along with it. But first, welcome, Rabbi Bleischer.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here to follow, mentors of Dr. Pitak and others who have preceded me in this podcast. The amount of education and knowledge that we're able to spread through this venue and this forum is really incredible. And to be a part of it is a real privilege today. And to be able to partner with you and all the work that you do across the Jewish community and beyond through PSI and Wurzweiler and everything else, it's really just a real privilege to be able to be a part of sharing what couples are experiencing on their fertility journey.
Well, thank you. I love that this opportunity in this forum for conversations about important things. I mean, for me, it's just fun to get to talk to interesting people and professionals. And like for me, this is a passion project, but it's also a fun project. I love this opportunity. So let's talk about just kind of setting the stage a bit about the reality of infertility. Recognizing that infertility is a word that is still kind of in movement. It's infertility. The more psychologically oriented communities are talking about it from the perspective of fertility struggles, fertility issues. But in a medical forum, it's diagnosed. It's a diagnosis of infertility. We know that it impacts at least 1 in 7 to 8 couples. I saw the information and the data was updated recently from 1 in 8 to 1 in 7. And we know that this is something that, if impacted by it within our community, we know that this is something that's going to really kind of be deeply, deeply rooted in issues relating to relationships and also identity of self. So before we get into the conversation around couples, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are professionally and kind of what brought you to this work?
Thank you so much. I think that the numbers are shifting, right? In 1 in 7, 1 in 6, maybe even 1 in 5. And so the prevalence of it is something that we need to be aware. As the rabbi of a shul in New Jersey for many years, I think what really, my siblings are doctors, and I've always enjoyed the interface between medicine and mental health. It fascinates me. I'm not a doctor. I don't want to be. But that intersection of, what I grew up with around my table, talking about anatomy and organic chemistry and things like that, this is an opportunity for me to turn to a sibling and really understand to the depth of how medicine and how mental health can be related and interface with one another. As the rabbi in a community, people would come to me and ask questions about genetics. I'm going out with a girl and I heard about some kind of genetic issue, and it seems like we're going to need to go through IVF. And what does that mean? Being able to understand both the halachic component of it, of what does it mean for him, for the male, what does it mean for her, for the female, to go through this process, to go through shidduchim, knowing that you're going to have to disclose something that's very personal, somewhat stigmatizing, potentially shameful. And how do I still hold myself up and say, this is who I am. I'm worthy of being married, of being a couple, of having a family. And it was something that really struck me on a very deep level. And as I went through the rabbinate and then pursued a master's in social work and went into the field of psychotherapy, understanding this is a niche that was, again, fascinating to me because of the intersection of medicine and health, but also a real service to the community. We don't talk about these issues enough. We don't have the opportunity to talk about the impact that infertility has on a couple. And I think that impact is something that, is, it's subtle in its process, right? There's a formal diagnosis of infertility of a couple that struggles to be able to have a child over the course of a 12-month period. But there's a reality that starts to set in the context of Taras Mishpacha, when a couple is observing the laws of family purity and the wife is going to the mikveh to be able to immerse herself and to become ritually pure. And month after month, while she's trying to conceive, that's a hard reality. And so it might set in after 6 months or 7 months or 9 months. But even before the diagnosis is formally given, there's an awareness that something's going on. And to be able to support a couple through that, having been through our own journey on growing our family in a way that feels comfortable for us, I can understand the sensitivity of being able to talk to a rabbi, being able to talk to a therapist, to family, to friends about issues that are both sensitive and deeply private. And so it's a privilege to be able to be part of this community of people who really value knowledge, evidence-based treatment, and to be able to share that with a community that doesn't get that information on a regular basis.
Right. One of the things that I think about is the interface between religious law and infertility in general. People who might not be as familiar with religious practice might not recognize it's the rabbinic kind of presence within the infertility struggle of a couple is way more than just pastoral support. And it's a much more detailed, much more guided experience where there's questions around what is acceptable, not acceptable, better practices, less better practices. And really there really is almost like, we talk about like third party reproduction. There's third party engagement. It's the couple, the doctor, and then the rabbis right there in the middle, right? Or the yoetz at halacha, somebody who guides individuals in how do we further our plan or dream of creating, building, or growing our family. So to those who might not be
Absolutely.
as familiar, like there's so much technical that goes into it from a religious law perspective, in addition to the technical that goes into it from a physical health perspective and a medical perspective. Um,
Absolutely.
Right. So then when you have a rabbi who actually is a rabbi who has experience in the clergy more than just the title rabbi, because I think we could differentiate between the two, that you have that pastoral experience, and then you layer on that the MSW and the social work and the psychotherapeutic perspective. There's a tremendous value in that, and I think that that's what I think is really kind of going to add to this conversation. So, in
Can I
thinking
just add,
about, yeah, sure.
I think even, for the rabbinic support, a rabbi who knows a little bit about infertility or reproductive treatment and in that space can actually guide a couple to a better doctor. So it's not just that the rabbi's in the room, but the rabbi can guide them to a more effective, a more successful, a more renowned professional who can get them to where they want to be to grow their family faster than they would be on their own. So there is the halachic component to it. There's also, answering questions and helping them decide, which professional, when should we start this process and how do we go about it? Because the reality of our community is that rabbis have experience listening to these questions, learning about the story, the family dynamic, and hopefully being able to distill that in a way that will be helpful for the couple because they're approaching this for the very first time. And it could be that they have no family history of infertility, but the rabbi, if he's had training or he's had, on the job experience, can help them understand to normalize the experience, to guide them to organizations and professionals that will be able to support them and expedite the process even so that they can reach their goal.
Yeah. I think about that as well in terms of the uniqueness of our community, and our being the broader Orthodox Jewish community is one of, it's not like I'm just going to go to my doctor. It becomes almost like the entire community is cheering you on to get pregnant, which has its value and its problems and its uniqueness. But there's no question that there is a sensitivity to the value of having a family and um, the desire to create a family from a communal perspective, and that therefore there are many different kinds of resources available that really kind of support couples in making headway towards that goal. And sometimes the rabbi is their first person that they're going to talk to before they even approach a reproductive endocrinologist. And I think that that's one of the ways that our community is particularly unique, in addition to the funding, which we can always talk about another time. But let's talk about the uniqueness of working with couples when I know that a lot of the couples that you've actually worked with have been couples that are really at the end of their story, meaning that they have pursued all options and they are kind of at the end of what they know to be their reproductive experience, or that there are no other options there. And I think that that's a very, very unique population that you've been working with. And I would like to come back to them before we finish today. I'm kind of like putting it there so I remember. But I would think that let's start with when you are working with a couple, what are the primary themes you're noticing in the therapeutic space?
I think that there are a couple of things that couples experience and they feel like we're doing this alone. There's nobody else who's ever experienced something like this. And that sense of isolation, partially because there's stigma in our community, as much as we try to speak about it and we try to raise awareness, the reality is that that stigma still exists. Every time that a couple goes home to their parents or their in-laws or to their extended family, and they're the only ones who don't have a child to bring with them, to talk about, to share stories with, and exchange toys and tips and things like that, there's a sense of loneliness that follows that couple wherever they go. And I think that that loneliness and being able to help them cope with what that means is something that catches couples off guard, and helping them expand their repertoire of what else can we talk about? How else can we relate to those people whose relationships are so important to us, that give us that drive and that oomph and that rejuvenation during the day, that we to lose those relationships simply because we're at a different stage in growing our family than the people around us. Um, I think that's number one, and that really impacts number two, which is that husbands and wives are going to cope with this in a very different way. You know, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Whether that's true or not, couple after couple, men and women cope with this in a very, very different way, and that's okay. And I think it's important for us to let the couples know that it's okay for us to see one person being sad, to give permission for one to have their feelings. You know, sometimes, let's say stereotypically, the husband will feel like he needs to be strong and he needs to be there for his wife because whether it's male factor infertility or female factor infertility, she is the identified patient. She is the one who is going through the vast majority of the medical treatment. And so he feels like he needs to support her on this medical journey. But sometimes he can't be strong. Sometimes he's struggling. Maybe there was a comment that he received in his place of work or study, or maybe there was an experience that he had with a family member, and he can't always be strong. And I think helping couples understand that there are going to be moments when you can stand up and you can support your partner, and sometimes it's okay to not be strong, and that we can be strong when we can be, and when we have the resources and the reserves emotionally and physically to do so.
Thinking also like, what does it mean to be strong? Right. Like, so, how do we define strength? And this is one of those words that's kind of a trigger word for me of like, very often in our society, we'll hear people say, well, she's so strong, or like, you just need to be strong. And I don't think that those things offer any form of support whatsoever. I don't think they offer literally anything for the person who's hearing it. And if anything, it feels offensive. Like, you have no idea what it feels like to be going through what I'm going through. So how dare you tell me either I should be strong or I am strong? That doesn't, for most people, that does not resonate, because we'll hear people say, well, do I have a choice? Right? Do I have a choice whether to be strong or not strong and dealing in the aftermath of of a death or of a loss or of infertility? Like, what's my option? So how do you pull that apart a bit when you're working with these couples of this idea of what does strength mean?
So that's a great question. And I think it's something that I'll work with when I work with an individual or working with a couple, to shift away from needing to be strong and really more about being present. Now, that also has a lot of different meanings. Just last night, I was working with a couple, and she wants him to be present, but what does present mean when part of his coping strategy is to withdraw? So he's physically in the same space, but he's mentally distracting himself or withdrawing himself emotionally to be able to cope and manage the huge emotions and feelings that are coming up for him. So can we facilitate a conversation between the two of them to deepen their understanding of what do you need from me? What does it mean for me to be present? What does it mean for me to be attentive? And if I haven't been able to do that, can we use this as a learning opportunity rather than feeling like we're doomed to failure as a couple, that we're never going to be able to get through this? And so shifting away, from strength to presence to attention, and to be able to help them deepen their level of understanding, because this is a journey, and it's a journey that both of them are committed to being on together, but they're also going to experience different things along the way. And helping them talk about that and create a dialogue will, I think, will ensure that they'll be able to reach that destination together more harmoniously. There was research that was put out last year, I think it was last year or early this year, by the OU, on couples who were divorced, on women who were divorced. And it said that 17% of divorced women experienced infertility, which is approximately within the range that we know to be average, but that I think 35% of those women experienced a lot of conflict related to fertility treatment. And so helping couples understand they're going to be disagreements? When should we start? How close to the holidays? How soon after the holidays? How much money can we invest? How much time are we up to invest in all this physical and emotional energy? And the more that we can have a dialogue about it, to be able to help them navigate the inevitable disagreements, because we're talking about two different people who are going through different things physically. One person is, having injections perhaps, or hormones that are changing their mood. And all of a sudden, you're not the spouse that I married or that I remember 2, 3 months ago. And so I need something else from you. That presence, that attention is going to shift over time. And all these things are things that we need to be able to continue talking about, evaluating together.
And I think that like what we are talking about, that idea of that really it's the keys of communication, right? Some people might be surprised where you have couples who are really on two different almost trajectories when it comes to fertility treatment. And you might assume like, well, they want to have a baby and therefore both will do whatever it takes to have a baby. But I also hear, I think we both hear that often you have one who is more actively pursuing and engaging and the other who's like, I'm going along for it, but like I'm not as committed as you are, or I'm willing to stop and be happy with what we have, or I'm willing to live without, or I really don't like what this is doing to you. And it can go in both directions. And I think, be cautious around assuming that what I just said relates to the men, that the men are the ones who are saying, let's stop. And the women are the ones who are saying, no, let's pursue. We absolutely see it in the other direction as well, where a male might be the one who's saying, but I really want to have a child, or I want desperately to have a biological child. And that idea of like progeny, that idea of like, this is my genetics being passed down, very often I'm hearing that perspective from men. And so to be careful in what we assume is who is feeling what in the relationship. And I think that comes back to that idea of what does strong mean will look different for either partner based on what they need in that experience and in that moment. But I want to like take us back for a minute to the comment you said about the idea of stigma, that these experiences can hold a lot of stigma. Going home to family can feel like we know that there's a sense of stigma that's associated with it. And I really think that we need to pull that apart a bit, because someone might say, well, why is there a stigma in a medical condition? Right? Why are we holding stigma here? This is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. And from your perspective, what you're hearing, where does that word stigma show up?
It's a great question. I think, among mental health professionals and general community that is more sensitive, people who are listening to this podcast already have a vested interest in gaining a deeper understanding about how we can create a more sensitive and supportive community. And it doesn't make sense that there should be stigma associated with infertility. It's a medical diagnosis, whether it's male factor infertility, female factor, or unexplained. It's no different than somebody having cold or the flu. You know, makes me think of, during COVID, people shamed each other for getting COVID. You weren't doing enough to keep yourself healthy or safe or masking up. And there's no shame in having a diagnosis. Things happen. We can't, you know, we think about a person who is born with a certain condition, whether it's a male factor infertility, they're not producing enough testosterone or sperm, or female factor, she's born with a uterine anomaly, or she has, an ovarian condition. These are things that people are born with, and there's no shame or stigma to be associated. Nobody did this to themselves. Nobody did this to their partner. Sometimes the shame comes up, or, I think the stigma can come up when it's not disclosed in the context of a marital relationship. A couple is dating, and let's say one partner knows that they have a genetic condition that can impact their fertility. So there might be some stigma, or shame associated with that. And being able to talk about this openly and recognize that there are medical treatments that are available for the vast majority of issues that couples are struggling with, and to help give rabbis the tools to educate their students and communities and people about it's okay that we have imperfections, right? We're all works in progress. But when it comes to stigma and understanding that for some reason it feels like I'm less than my sibling sitting next to me because I haven't been able to reach that stage, or we don't feel comfortable sharing it with parents or family because the parents themselves are anticipating reaching that next stage in their own development, that they're anticipating becoming grandparents. And if only you would go to a doctor, if only you would get off contraception, if only you would do this or do that, or just relax or go on vacation. What are you doing to be able to change that? And they have no idea what the couple is struggling with. They don't know how much effort is being invested. And so I think that the stigma comes from a lot of assumptions that are made and not enough curiosity and genuine openness to understanding and hearing the couple to the extent that they feel comfortable sharing their journey with others. I think it comes from a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding.
Right. And I think that part of this also is a sense of like, I think the internalized shame is the feeling, a shame or stigma is this feeling of my body was supposed to do something, right? My body was supposed to do something that everybody else, right? We all love that line, but everybody else's body does. And it feels so like, but my body maybe even has the parts to do it. And my body is not giving me or giving us this responsibility, this role, this child that we dreamed about that everybody else has. And I think that that's part of this sense of like what the norm is. And the norm is that people get married and have babies. And the
Yes.
to be falling outside the norm, especially in such a very, very public way, right? If I have a uterine abnormality, nobody else needs to know. But when I don't have children, everybody else knows. And I think that it's almost like walking through the world and especially through community under a microscope. And as much sensitivity and care and kindness we can provide is our responsibility. But with the recognition that there is no way for us to fully remove that sense of loss and that sense of devastation that people have as they are trying to create their families and they're not getting or getting what they would like and what they dreamed about. How do you see it impacting the couple? What do you notice in the relationship?
Yeah, I've noticed that partners tend to feel that sense of stigma on different levels, right? And it could be male, it could be female, but one person might be more sensitive to that sense of stigma than the other. And then that imbalance of how much shame or how much stigma do we hold when we walk into a Hanukkah party or Pesach Seder is going to impact how comfortable they are going into that home or walking through the doorway. And whatever anxiety and worry comes up in advance, the tension that can come up and boil up just under the surface in the couple's interactions, in the moments and days and weeks leading up to those moments when they're afraid of that stigma being highlighted, right? That maybe in their community, they've created a bubble for themselves or they've created an environment that feels safe and warm, that people understand their circumstances. But when we go away or when we go to a family simcha, that level of understanding is not present and it's absent. And so helping the couple understand that just because you're feeling it so intensely doesn't necessarily mean that your partner is, and vice versa. That if you're not feeling it so intensely, it's okay, it's understandable for the other person to be feeling it at a much heightened rate. And what can we do to get through this together? Are there some interventions? Are there things that we can do to support each other? Even to just see, like, I see how uncomfortable this is for you as they're walking in, and to normalize that process of, again, being on this journey together.
Right. I always talk about the idea with these couples. I talk about having an exit strategy.
Yeah.
We have friends of ours in Arizona who the husband will turn to his wife when he wants to leave the room and he'll go, "Esther, what's the program?" So, it's become a joke with my husband and I when he'll say, "Esther, what's the program?" I know it means like, "Can we go home yet?" But the idea of having a code word
Mhm.
or a communication that says, I need to get out, I need to go, I need to refresh, I need to like kind of step away in order to come back. And that's been one of the strategies that I think about because the intensity of these public spaces is extreme. And teaching skills of communication, I mean, we're not born with them necessarily, right? Like where it's modeled for us potentially, sometimes it's definitely not modeled for us. But I think about when communication is needed under duress or under stress, it's a different kind of communication. What are some of the things that you're noticing with the couples?
Think it requires another level of energy and attention. So I'm at the same time that I'm trying to regulate myself emotionally and I'm trying to stay present with my partner, I'm trying to be present with the people around me. I also need to remember, oh, that communication skill or I need to be able to summon some more energy to be able to respond to a very inartful or hurtful comment that somebody makes to me or to my wife or to my partner. And then I also need to turn to my partner and use that exit strategy. So we have to keep in mind that there's a lot of energy that goes into just trying to get through these really uncomfortable moments and experiences. And I think in a couple I was working with the other day, making that choice of I'd rather endure that discomfort and I'd rather just swallow the pain that comes up with someone staring at my belly or someone making a comment about my looks or about the size of our family than having to actually confront them or having to speak up for myself or even turning to my husband and saying I need to get out of here. So respecting that different couples are going to cope with that differently. Some will say I need that exit strategy, and others will say I'd rather just stick it out and then we'll talk about it later or we'll go do something afterwards to process that pain. It's really very subjective, but it's
Yeah.
almost always there. And we don't even know. Like the kindest word, the most well-meaning, um, this must be so hard for you, being here with all the children around. Of course, the person means well, but it also highlights again, like everyone else has children, and there's something about me or our situation, our status as a couple that that we're different. And
Right.
it's difficult to be able to navigate that.
And I think like, you and I both have seen clients where 50% of the clients I would say would be like, how could you not have acknowledged? How could you not have said something? How could you not have noticed the fact that we, noticed in a sensitive and kind and compassionate way? And then the other 50% are like, don't you say one word, not one word. You treat us normal, like everybody else. Let us go home. Right. But the idea of creating a sensitivity it's a double-edged sword because it's not 100% in any direction. It really isn't. I can't say with
And it
100%
could depend on
assurity.
the person.
Yes, completely. And it's like I can't say with 100% conviction, if you say this, you'll be good. Right? Like this will be the nice thing to say. Um, I was just talking with a client who said to me that, the family gets Hanukkah gifts on Yantiv on Hanukkah. Everybody gets a bag, like all the married siblings get a bag. And depending on who your children are, ages, um, genders, etc., you'll get a specific thing in the bag. And so she said to me, like, and my bag doesn't have any baby stuff in it. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, but if your bag had the baby stuff in it, you'd be offended because the baby, and I pointed it out to her, of course, because I can. And I was like, yeah, but if the baby stuff was in the bag, you would have been, how dare you give me the baby stuff? I don't have any babies. Right. Or a sibling was offended, a family member was offended about, like, I didn't get the girl toy because I only have boys. Like, it's almost like there are parts of this that are just itchy. Like there's a sensitivity here that we have to be aware of, that we have to be kind and notice and be compassionate about. With the knowledge, those of us that are on the outside looking in, we may not always get it right, and that's just part of being on that outer circle, not
And
knowing
I think
exactly.
helping the couple understand that people mean well, and
Yeah.
sometimes not just the like objectively hurtful comments, but when
Right.
there's something that they experience where can we use the most gracious interpretation rather than the least gracious interpretation of how
Yeah.
that comment can be experienced, and to know that this is uncomfortable and it's
Yeah.
because of my commitment to this relationship, whether it's a relationship to a partner or a relationship to the extended family, that I'm going to continue showing up when I can
Yeah.
because it's that important to me. And that God willing, we're going to reach a point where we will grow our family and we will be able to connect differently than we are now. And unless we're able to work through, sometimes things are uncomfortable for lots of reasons, not only related to infertility, but when it comes to family dynamics, there's stress points in family dynamics that create discomfort. And the more that we can acknowledge that and be able to process that and manage those feelings, when that celebratory moment comes, we'll be able to have that much stronger relationship with that person to kind of move on from.
And I think that that speaks to the couple's relationship as well, right? Not just the couple into the family, but in terms of how the couple will survive this experience. Like infertility can be a reason why couples don't last. I once worked with a couple who, she was just so focused on IVF, 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 and he was just, there was a lot of stuff going on. And I kept saying, can we talk about the relationship? Can we talk about the marriage? And she was like, absolutely not. I'm not even, I just need a baby. And I warned her, we talked about it. I'm like, but you're going to have a baby and the marriage is not going to be functional. And sure enough, she had the baby and he was sleeping on the couch, right? Like, does I'm not proud of that reality, but I am acknowledging that sometimes we become so unifocused on the fertility that we forget the relationship. And at other times, you see couples who are so magnificent in their nurturing of their marriages and their relationships that it sets this magnificent foundation for the future. Um, and maybe we could talk a little bit about like what are some of the things that you notice are protective of these marriages? Obviously, I don't have data points to support it, but we have experience, right? But what are some of the things you notice that are likely protective of their marriages for when they do have a family? That these are the things that really make it work.
It's a really great question. And I think some of those protective features might be that the commitment to learning more about themselves in the process of how do I communicate when I'm under stress? How do I react when I'm under stress? How do I cope when I'm under stress? And this is a level of stress that some people, I've had clients, everything is going right in their life. They've been, star students, they've been socially successful, well integrated into the community. They got, great husbands or wives, they have great jobs professionally, everything is going well. And this is like the first time that they've ever experienced something so difficult. And they don't have the skills to be able to get through it in a way that feels right for them. And so if we can help couples understand that this is a learning process and this is, you spoke about couples that get through it, with stronger, closer relationships. Part of the way that they do that is by recognizing that this is part of our journey. And this is another thing that I'm going to learn. So if I learned Gemara or if I learned Flemish or chemistry, so now I'm learning how to navigate adversity in my life when I wasn't expecting it. Um, I think that so understanding your own process and then understanding how do we get through this as a couple. I think couples that are able to widen the perspective of what does it mean to be a happy couple, to be, feeling content and fulfilled in your marriage, and that their parent is parenting is only one aspect of one's identity, right? So in the meantime, while we're working with doctors, while we're working with all the professionals and all the support that we're bringing into our marriage and into our home, can I also find other ways to nurture those other things that are meaningful to me? There might be hobbies that you haven't been able to spend time on because you're so busy with insurance companies and scheduling appointments. And so when there's a break in that treatment plan, what else can we do to fill that void? That it won't fill it 100%, but it's something that can be also meaningful for the couple. A project that they can undertake so that when, God willing, they have a baby, they'll say, "Look at what we were able to accomplish in the meantime." And I think looking for those opportunities to create meaning and fulfillment while they're also pursuing their fertility success is something that also is a marker of a successful and resilient couple.
Yeah. I think about, more than one person who has said to me, sometimes at night, I'm bored. And I think that that's
Yeah,
such a raw, honest assessment of some of the difficulties, especially even when there are two people in the room, even when there's two connected, emotionally, healthy people in the room, it is difficult to only be the two people in the room for so many years in a row.
yeah,
And I think, some of us who are blessed with children are thinking like, oh, it'd be so nice to just be two people in the room, me and my husband, but or my husband and I. But it's not, that is not the experience for those that are struggling with fertility. And I think that the acknowledgement of, we're not saying to somebody, oh, just learn how to knit. That's not what we're suggesting. It's more that the creating of an identity independent of parenthood. And I think one of the things that's so complex about that is that I dare I say in the religious world, that is almost unheard of. That idea of self efficacy, of self development, of this is who I am independent of being a parent is super, super complex. And I would say that it's just the same with those who are older singles or singles who have not yet married, who am I as a person independent of my partnership or of not being partnered? And I think that that's where being a part of a community where there's not that much variety of family, right? Like this is we
Right,
really almost never meet someone who says I am childless by choice, right? That
right.
doesn't exist in our culture openly. Let's put it that way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I think being able to recognize that couples are going through different journeys and understanding that for some, being able to send the kids away to camp for the summer, and that is one way that a couple can have quiet in their home, but that's a choice that they're making. For a couple that's struggling with infertility, they don't get to make that choice. And we can acknowledge that it takes time to adjust to that and that there's a lot of grief that needs to be processed. Yes, I'm going to take on a hobby. It could be knitting, it could be starting some community initiative or getting involved in something that is deeply meaningful, but it's not going to replace that maternal or paternal drive, which is something that, has deep religious sources in in the Torah. In the time that we're very young, we're learning about mothers and fathers of the Avos and the Imahos. We're learning about from in school on so many different levels how to prepare for marriage and how to prepare for parenthood. And there's a lot of subconscious messages and education that comes in along the way. And for an individual and a couple to be able to just, oh, okay, that's not going to be my reality. I think we need to give them space and understand that that doesn't happen so quickly. And I think that's why there are, organizations and doctors that are so committed because we get that this really makes a person feel very different than the community around them. There are not, with the exception of some communities that are somewhat transient of, professionals and singles, it's difficult to find a community that will be totally welcoming to someone whose experience is so vastly different. We
And
welcome,
I would also clarify that it's not that they were not welcoming. It's like they're welcome at my Shabbos table, but in terms of where is their place, right? You walk into Shul and you
yes,
walk through the baby carriages. You walk into a speech and all you hear about the door, the door vador, right? Like the Sorah, passing it on from generation to generation. Like the structure is for parents,
yeah,
partnered parents, and
yeah,
they are welcome, but they may feel like there is no place for them. Yeah. Let
right.
me ask
And
you
that
because
and
I
that's
did
where I
mention it.
think,
Yeah, go ahead.
having a discussion and even from a rabbinic perspective, to be able to talk, whether it's one-on-one with the couple or from the pulpit or in classes, to be able to help people expand their definition of what does it mean to be part of the community and how can we be more inclusive? How can we recognize that Pesach might be triggering because they don't have children to ask them on Hashanah, and
Right.
Simchas Torah might be challenging because they don't have a child to bring to Kol Hana'arim. And these are moments that are difficult for couples, or for people who are, if we expand it to people who are not married or not yet married. And can we create space? Can we create discussion so that they don't need to feel like they're outsiders or less than, but that they can feel comfortable coming in, knowing that they're going to be acknowledged? And by the way, going back to a point that you made before, sometimes that acknowledgement by a rabbi, by a community member, can also be deeply painful and meant in the most sensitive and supportive way, but again highlights I'm different. I don't have what I really want right now.
Right.
And it's
Right.
it's it's a challenge, but it doesn't mean that we have the right to step back
Right.
from it.
I agree. I agree. In the last couple minutes that we have left, because I don't want to leave it without a comment, tell me something that you've learned from the clients that you work with where they are at the end of their fertility struggle, where they have not been successful or they know that they cannot have children.
I think the strength that they have for being able to remain committed to one another, understanding that infertility is not a punishment and it's not something that they deserve, but it's circumstances that they're experiencing together in their marriage, and being able to honor that and to focus on the connection of the couple and understanding what is the value of your marriage, of your partnership, of your relationship outside of the expected parent identity that is not going to be accessible. And that's number one. Number two is trying to help them balance, depending on the circumstance, whether there's any hope for medical advancement in the future, right? Of not completely giving up on this dream of becoming parents, but remaining connected to medical professionals who are at the forefront of research and development and trying to understand, okay, this test didn't work, but it's possible that in a year or two from now things might be different. That's one of the most exciting things of working in this space is seeing just how quickly science is advancing and holding on to that promise, not unrealistically, but giving them a little bit of hope for the future, is something that, I've learned to hold on to from them.
Mm. Wow. I had a woman who said to me, she was, and this was to me, spoke to the magnificence of her relationship with her husband. She said to me, her husband, it was male factor infertility. There was no sperm. And her husband, she said to me, this was our story. She said, this is not my husband's medical issue. This is our story. This was meant to be my story from the beginning. And and I always, when I hear that, when people sometimes say to me, like, do you ever cry in session? And I'm like, only when I'm exposed to the most awe-filled moments, and that's one of them, right? The
Yeah,
moment of awe when you see the courage that people have to really step into their marriages and step into their stories with it's courageous. It is just courageous, and it is magnificent to see. And as you and I both know, it's a privilege to be able to watch that happen in front of us. So if we
yeah.
could conclude
There's
today,
research, I
yeah,
think, from
go ahead.
China and Denmark about the higher incidence of divorce among couples that can't have children. And I think anecdotally, I don't know that there's any research in the Jewish community, but I don't think that the numbers are nearly as high, which is really a testament to the strength. And, we value marriage for the sake of being in a married relationship, and that being able to nurture that and strengthen that, even when something goes wrong, when someone, loses a relative or there's a medical illness that changes the trajectory of that family forever. But there's a commitment that is so beautiful and so inspiring to watch, and to be able to bear witness to that, and to be able to give them whatever minimal tools we can offer them to help them continue moving forward is really just such a privilege.
Agreed. I agree. All right, top 2 or 3 misconceptions that you would like people to know.
Okay. um, I think just on that point, if we are coping differently, there's probably something wrong with us, right? If he needs to withdraw and she wants to like completely talk about her medical appointments or talking to the insurance company or how difficult it was being with friends, that is not uncommon. That is so normal. And I think that we want to help couples understand that we're going to be coping with this differently. We're two different people. Chazal tell us that kasha zivugin can kriyas yamsuf, that putting a couple together is as difficult as splitting the Red Sea. And that's because we're two very different people with two different personalities and two different ways of coping. And when you have something this stressful, it's okay for us to notice that the other person is going to go through it in a different way. It doesn't mean that you're doomed to divorce. It doesn't mean that you're doomed to not continue this journey. And research shows that the primary reason that a couple steps out of pursuing their full reproductive treatment is because of the emotional toll. It's not financial, but it's
Right.
just how disruptive it is to their family
Right.
life and to their professional life. And
Mhm.
so understanding this is real and it does take a toll, but I can see how that's helpful for you. And I can see how you need that time, as long as we can find the time to come back for each other, and being clear about that commitment. And I need this and you need that, and then we're going to have this together. So that's misconception number one.
Okay.
I think from a rabbinic perspective, understanding that infertility is not Hashem's way of punishing you for some action or some sinful behavior or avera that you might have done in the past. I find that sometimes couples come in with this deep, intense pain and feeling like I'll never be able to do tshuva, I'll never be able to repent, and this is God's way of punishing me for something that I did. Again, if it's a anatomic, if it's an anomaly that a person has was born with, or some kind of medical issue that they discover once they're married, there's no way for us to know the ways of Hashem. We don't know the ways of God. And we know that sometimes we're tested in life. And that's something that we can also pull from Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel. We're tested. That's also part of life. And it doesn't mean that God is pouring out his wrath because of something that you did. It could be that this is an opportunity for us to deepen our relationship and to grow in advance of welcoming that child sometime down the road. But it comes with so much heaviness and so much sadness that I think it's a misconception that's worth letting go of. And maybe the last one is, if we just relax, if we go on vacation, if we listen to all the advice that our parents and in-laws give us, then everything is going to get all better. And I think it's important to listen to family and friends who care. And, again, God willing, there's going to be a day when things will be different, when you will have a child to hold and you want to celebrate with all those people. So we want to be mindful of, I appreciate their intent while I'm rejecting what they say because it's hurtful, but also trying to maintain that relationship in the long term.
Excellent. 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 Thank you so much, Robert Blaisher, for spending this time with me today. I know that this is information that's powerful and gives much consideration to the realities of couples facing infertility. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.